afternoon. I think it's a great privilege being here and sharing my ideas with this group of youngsters who are aspiring and inspiring to shape the world of tomorrow. So let me start asking you a question. What is the iconic building or structure that any of you would think is most important in India? I knew that would be the answer. Well, for me, it is the Brigadishwara temple in Tanjavur. Have you all seen that? Yeah. So this was consecrated in 1010 AD by the king Rajaraja Cholan. And this in scale and its mammoth scale and grandeur is something that marks a sea change in the way Hindu temples have been designed and constructed. The mammoth walls of this temple have inscriptions of all the designers and people who partook in the building, conception, and construction. It has records of what it took, how much was spent for putting up this monument, and who were the donors. It also has a hierarchy of artists, hierarchy of officers who were involved in the construction, and also the transactional networks that were used to dispense responsibility politically, to source the materials that went into the construction, and also to see how this would culturally sustain not only the temple precinct, but also the surrounding area of Tanjavur. I think this is truly a tribute to what India needs today, and it resonates completely with my belief of holistic sustainability. This doll is also called the Tanjavur doll. It's made in Tanjavur, and this ensures that we strike a balance. So the choices are many. We are always tugged by forces and pulls, but we should ensure ultimately that equilibrium and balance is required in our lives. So Tanjavur has been a source of inspiration for Indocentricity and for Indocentric detail architecture for me and my firm. So now, if you look at it, what the components that went into the construction and this edifice is leadership, is dialogue with the people, and it is the private sector partnership. Rajaraja Cholan was very inclusive in this, and it epitomizes his inclusiveness with respect to diverse faiths, genders, and vocations of those days. So here we do need leadership, we need dialogue with the public, and we need partnerships and collaborations to see that we churn out the best results which respond to the situations and issues of today. So smart cities are those that provide stress-free living while giving you a cultural identity that is unique. So urban design is very important in cities. We do not give it the due respect that is required. Human behavior responds to the built environment, as we all talked about roti, kapda, makan. So now we've come to makan. And you find that these are so important, and the design of these spaces can bring about social change and social transformation. So the aspirations of the people are addressed through the process of design. But having said this, I think all our cities are languishing with improper infrastructure and a growth that is very, very difficult to manage. And the transformation of this, according to World Bank, it says that not only in India, globally, the budgets for up to 2050 is a year-on-year expenditure of about 4.5 trillion US dollars to 5.5 trillion dollars to see that all our cities respond to our planetary boundaries and make it resilient to climate change. This is humongous, isn't it? So cities, we all know, are enablers of growth, are enablers of change, and they still produce about 70% of the world's greenhouse emissions and 60% of the waste generated. So how do we tackle this? And what is the kind of balance? And how do we move forward to see that we create cities that are responsive and are resilient to climate change? So urban designers are central to the design of cities. Just as when you look at a building which is beautiful and efficient, there is so much of engineering and so much of detail and design that has gone into it, which responds to the people's needs. That makes it comfortable and relevant. So, too, in a bigger ambience, in the macro environment, urban designers are required to see that small details make our lives much better. So we have, let me go to the previous slide. We have technology, rapidly growing technology, some of them disruptive, some of them so positive. But technology is what is driving us today. And do you think that all these technologies are smart? Is it what smart cities require? I don't think so. Because I think upgradation and constant obsolescence of these technologies is a challenge that we are facing. I think that the smartness in smart cities needs to come from within the people and to identify what is it that makes a city smart and which could be different for different cities. For Shillong, being smart should be ecologically friendly as well as perhaps capitalize on the tourism potential. Whereas for, say, any other place like Coimbatore, maybe it is industry-driven, how industry can kind of socio-economically change and transform the place, so for which connectivity might be required and for which so many other parameters need to be looked into. So it is very different. So you have to search within to find what that special need is to make the city smart. So there is no, now we have, I think the government has said there is about 100 crores of rupees that is available for 100 smart cities. So which is a huge sum. But what is it that makes a city smart? Is there a definition? Is there a definition? No. Is there an indicator? Is there a methodology to find out how to make it smart? So it has to come from within the people. So the people have to make their city smart. So you have to search and find out what that unique need of every city is to make it smart. So now, when you look at that, I think you find that there are, as like these tugs and pulls in different directions. Every city, you have to address climate, you have to address resource availability, you have to address the carbon footprint, you have to address the social aspirations of people, you have to address the local craft that is available, the local art that is available, the food, the cuisine, the fabric, everything to be able to make one city that is smart and responsive. Of course, you need technology. Of course, you need technology. But technology is a tool that is available in our hands today. So using the right technology and moving up with all these stakeholders playing the orchestra, it's like a huge orchestra. So if one person is playing a miss note, then the whole orchestra fails. So a city is like that. So we have to work in tandem and play tango to see that our city blossoms. So it is participatory. It is a bottom-up approach. A lot of money is required. Humongous amounts of money are required to see that all these visions become a reality. So how do you make it? How do you identify it? I think we all know, and especially management students know, how important case studies are. So case studies are there to learn from. So there might be some case studies which you adapt, some case studies which you say, no, 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 that's not for us. And then you come up with what is right for you and modify it and adapt it so that it suits your intrinsic needs. For example, let me just give you an example of what a primary objective of every city can be. Say, for example, if a primary objective is connectivity. So infrastructure, safety, culture, climate, energy consumption, they are all secondary objectives. So you cannot say that I need connectivity at any cost. So connectivity has to be designed in such a way that all these secondary parameters are also addressed. So it is only then that you can create something which is holistically sustainable and which is long-term and not short-term. Always these housing that is done during any games, for example, even Delhi did this. The Asian Games village was built. So much of housing was built. And then after the games, they didn't know what to do with the housing. So for a long time, it was empty till, all the government officers were asked to use them. So this is what I mean by saying that you have to look at it long-term. And in order to be long-term, it has to sustain. And unless it responds to the climate, the environment, the people, the culture, the aspirations of people, and the arts that are available, and something that really is special for every city, you are not going to make it holistically sustainable. So this is the groundswell that is required. People's participation. People make cities. So it's about humanity, and it is about the planet. So how do you try and see that all stakeholders are taken care of? So the philosophy of the Reciprocal Design Index was born, as they said, in 2012 at the World Economic Forum Design Innovation Council. So this has been expressly created to face the challenges of this multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder kind of a situation, and how to be inclusive, at the same time how to be equitable to all the stakeholders. So the Reciprocal Design Index is a scientific method by which indices that are created in order to see that holistic sustainability is achieved, and also a method by which metrics are available for people who fund to analyze benchmark progress and see whether they are going in the right direction. And ultimately, to see and compare cities and the livability and the happiness in each city. So this, the RDI, as I call it, the Reciprocal Design Index, involves and is for academicians, politicians, the people, the funders, and all of them to be able to come together and to analyze and see how a particular city can move forward on a trajectory that they have crafted for themselves as their priority. So it is iterative, it is transactional, it is inclusive, it is equitable, and ultimately, it is reciprocal. It reciprocates to the needs of the day. So our cities today, urbanization, I think we have about 400 million people in urban centers today. And I think by 2030, we are going to be 815 million people. And what is most staggering is that 60% of the development of urban centers is going to be greenfield. And what does that mean? That means that our cities are going to expand, and when they expand into forest land, they encroach into agricultural land, and it becomes a huge problem for us to handle. So when this happens, development happens on the periphery, and as all of you would agree, I think our country, development happens before infrastructure. So if infrastructure comes and development follows, things happen, but otherwise it is chaotic. So this is a situation that we have to deal with. And we always find that when movement from the city center happens towards the peripheries tend to rot. This is the case of Detroit. This is the case of so many global cities. So how do you see that the vibrancy of a city is retained and you have a manageable entity that you are able to modulate, design, and control? So the current housing deficit is around 19 million units, out of which I think we have around 55% of EWS and about 40% of LIG. EWS is economically weaker section, and LIG is the lower income group, which means it's 95% of 19 million homes. So this is the task that India has set themselves for. So now, when you look at it, you say that EWS housing requires about 30 square meters, and the other housing, LIG housing, requires about 60. The land availability that is required for this kind of a development works out only to around 1,660 square kilometers of metropolitan area. And that comes to around 25% of the cities are taken into account, then it is only 3.5% of the land area. This is not a big task, but it requires innovative ways to see that this can happen in a planned way. So this is one of the projects that we have worked on, incremental housing. I think I will run through it because I've run short of time. And then this is the holistic sustainability, how art, culture, our own saris, our own color can form inspirations for cities, and how ultimately it is all about striking a balance, but being original in your thoughts. Thank you so much.